Hey guys, tonight we're not going to be dealing with any musty old books or dry constitutional amendments. Tonight we're strapping on a heavy wool tunic, smelling the salt and fish oil, and becoming a Viking Shieldmaiden. Now, before you start picturing yourself as some kind of fantasy Valkyrie with flowing blonde hair and an impossible breastplate, you know the kind of armor that defies physics and history. We need a reality check. You are stepping into a world that is breathtakingly cold, brutally practical, and utterly unforgiving. You might be a warrior, an estate manager, and a force of nature, but you probably won't survive this. Life expectancy in the Viking Age was, shall we say, a little lower than your current comfy existence. Right now, you're standing on the mossy ground of your family's farmstead, in what you call Midgard, and the air is stinging your cheeks. There's the low, rhythmic hammering of the smithy in the distance, a sound that is the pulse of your community. You feel the familiar, comforting weight of the iron-bladed sacks at your hip. Not a decorative knife, but a short sword that has been as much a part of your daily wear since you were 10 as the sturdy leather boots on your feet. You are about to discover that in Viking society, gender roles are far more fluid and practical than the Christianized world that will eventually replace your culture. They don't have time for frills and pink when there are raids to plan and estates to manage. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you are in the comments and what time it is. Maybe someone in Oslo is watching this at 3:00 a.m. and someone in Los Angeles is watching at 6:00 p.m. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes not to a nursery, but to a world of work. As a child, you never had the luxury of simply being a little girl. From the moment you could walk, you were an asset to the Skarl, the household. You were taught to spin wool, certainly, and to churn butter, but you were just as often handed a small, blunted axe or a whittling knife. Your father, a formidable man whose hands were equally skilled with a rudder or a battle axe, didn't care what your reproductive organs were. He cared that you had the skills to survive, to defend the homestead when he was away, and to contribute to the family's wealth and reputation, or its AL. The idea that you'd spend your youth learning only feminine domestic arts is frankly a modern misunderstanding. When your father is gone for 6 months on a longship, someone has to protect the cattle from wolves. Someone has to manage the thralls, the slaves captured on raids, which we'll get to later. And someone has to be able to use a weapon if a rival clan decides to pay a hostile visit. That someone, more often than not, is you and your mother. You learn the bow and arrow early, not just for hunting deer, but because a well-aimed shot can drop a man just as easily as a reindeer. And a mainstream historical fact you absorb early is that the spear is the most common weapon in all of Scandinavia, not the flashy axe you see in video games. It's cheap to make, easy to repair, and devastatingly effective at keeping an opponent at a safe distance. Your training is integrated into your life. You help herd the animals, and your father uses the process to teach you basic flanking maneuvers. You watch the older boys spar not from a safe distance, but close enough to hear the thwack of wood on leather shield and the guttural effort of a heavy swing. Your early teenage years are marked by the uncomfortable process of learning to wear a shield strap properly so that the weight is distributed across your shoulder and back and not just dragging down your arm. You learn that a shield is not a passive wall. It's an extension of your body used for punching, shoving, and most importantly, blinding an opponent for a split second before you thrust. It's the ultimate multi-tool. Here's a quirky or fringe tidbit for you. Some historians speculate that the Viking chess-like game of Hnefatafl was used as a serious tactical training tool for young women who were being groomed for leadership or command roles, teaching them advanced strategy defense and how to sacrifice minor pieces for a major victory. You learn to play this game with grim seriousness, moving your king piece, representing the chieftain, and your surrounding defenders across the board with silent intensity. You learn that a good defense is worthless without an exit plan, a fallback position that lets you survive to fight another day. You don't need a formal army to tell you this is serious. The reality is that the Viking Age is a meritocracy of survival. If you are competent, you are valued. If you are strong, you are respected. If you are intelligent, you are feared. In a world where the lifeblood of the family, the men are constantly sailing off into the horizon for months or years at a time, the competence of the women who stay behind or who choose to go with them is not a bonus, but a necessity. Your inherited property and identity depends on your ability to hold the fort. You are not a delicate flower. You are the solid, well-rooted oak that stands firm against the north wind. And this is where the identity of the Shieldmaiden truly forms. It's not just about a romanticized choice to wear armor. It's a societal acceptance that if you can fight, you will fight. There are plenty of women who choose the domestic path, running successful trading posts or large estates without ever touching a sword, and they are highly respected. But for you, the draw is the sea, the raid, the glory, the promise of a reputation that stretches beyond your own village. You've heard the sagas. You know the names of Brynhild and Freyd's Erxtyr. You know that glory is not exclusive to the male half of the population. Historians still argue whether the Shieldmaiden was a truly common, widespread occurrence, or a powerful yet rare elite warrior class mentioned primarily in legendary sagas. But for you standing here on the mossy ground, the distinction is meaningless. You see yourself and you see the strength in your arms that comes from years of hauling fishing nets and splitting firewood, and you know you are ready. Ready for the next stage, the formal training that comes with joining the herd, the chieftain's personal retinue, which we will look at next. You just try not to trip on that stray root as you walk toward the longhouse. That would be embarrassing. The transition from being a competent farmhand to a warrior in the chieftain's hired, that tight, dedicated retinue of sworn followers, isn't marked by a ceremony or a fancy graduation. It's marked by calluses and bruises. You remember the sting of the cold morning air as you joined the others' boys and a few other girls outside the settlement palisade. The air hung with the smell of wood smoke, wet leather, and something metallic which you knew with a slight internal clench was the faint odor of blood from the day before. Your teenage years are now spent in a perpetual state of training. This is your apprenticeship in survival, the ultimate vocational course. The shield wall is the centerpiece of your early combat education, and you practice it until the formation feels as natural as breathing. You learn that a shield wall is not a static line of defense. It's a living, breathing, and terrifyingly efficient engine of war. You stand shoulder to shoulder with the others, your wooden shield interlocking with the person next to you. You learn to brace for impact, planting your feet and leaning into the weight of the man or woman beside you. Your entire focus is on maintaining that tight barrier, absorbing the shock of a charge, and then at the precise moment of maximum pressure, shoving back. The spears extend like the quills of an angry hedgehog. You quickly realize that the men are taller, perhaps heavier, but you compensate with a lower center of gravity and sheer, stubborn muscle memory. You use the shield's edge to punch, to create space, and to protect the exposed legs of the warrior next to you. The training is relentless, often starting before dawn. You run carrying weighted sacks, not for fun, but because you might have to sprint across uneven ground, carrying a wounded comrade and a full pack of plunder. You practice spear drills until your arm feels like lead learning to thrust straight and fast, not to throw like a modern athlete, but to deliver a sharp, deep stab that finds the gaps in the enemy's defenses. A quirky or fringe tidbit about this is that the spears you use in training often have small wooden balls fixed just behind the point, forcing you to focus on the momentum and weight transfer of the thrust, not the sharpness of the blade. The ball teaches you to drive the spear, not just poke with it. You also learn to master the sword, the most prestigious, and therefore the most expensive weapon you might carry. Swords are status symbols, and yours, if you are lucky enough to own one, has a name. You practice the cut and thrust technique, not the fancy dueling you might imagine, but powerful, downward cleaving blows designed to shatter bone and punch through leather armor. A massive mainstream historical fact is that the vast majority of Viking Age swords were of the double-edged spatha type, sometimes adorned with intricate patterns in the metal, a technique known as pattern welding. You learn that these swords were incredibly valuable, sometimes passed down for generations, and dropping one in battle is a disgrace worse than a bad haircut. Though honestly, your braided hairstyle is designed more for keeping hair out of your eyes during a fight than for fashion, so the hair is probably safe. Your involvement in the herd also means becoming politically savvy. You are not just a fighting arm. You are part of your chieftain's extended family and power base. You learn about alliances, grudges, and the complex system of gift-giving that maintains loyalty. You realize that sometimes a well-chosen marriage alliance is a more effective weapon than a sword thrust. You listen in on the assembly, where disputes are settled and laws are made. You absorb the culture of honor and vengeance that dictates every relationship. To be insulted is a serious matter. To ignore it is to invite disrespect and the erosion of your family's standing. Historians still argue whether the herd included women as a regular feature across all Viking regions, or if their inclusion was geographically or tribally specific. The sources, mostly later Icelandic sagasar, often contradictory. But for you, the proof is in the sweat and the aching muscles. You are here, you are useful, and the chieftain relies on your competence. The men around you may crack jokes about your slightly smaller stature, but they respect the fact that you held the line when Lars from the neighboring farm tried to sneak up during a mock attack, and they know you can hold your own oar when the waves get choppy. You also learn about logistics, the truly boring part of being a Viking. You learn how much food-salted meat, dried fish, and fermented rye bread it takes to feed 50 people for a week on a longship. You learn how to check the integrity of your armor, how to sharpen your own blades, and how to patch holes in a sail. This is the unseen labor of war, the stuff that wins campaigns long before the first clash of steel. You are not simply a warrior. You are an incredibly versatile, self-sufficient engine of war. You trudge back to the longhouse as the weak sun dips below the horizon, every muscle screaming, but there is a satisfying heaviness in your steps. You are tired, but you are strong and you are prepared. The herd has forged you into something harder than the soft iron of your first blade. That skill, the knowledge that you can handle yourself, is the most valuable thing you will ever possess. Your years in the herd prepare you for battle, but they also prepare you for perhaps the greatest strategic maneuver of all marriage. You might think of it as a romantic pairing, but in the Viking Age, your wedding is a high-stakes business transaction, one that fundamentally alters your social standing and, crucially, your wealth. The most visible sign of this transition comes not in the form of a diamond ring, but a simple piece of cloth, the kerchief or head covering. Before marriage, you are Mr. Maiden, your hair unbound or in simple braids. Once married, you become Heiðsfreyja, mistress of the house, and your hair is covered. This isn't about modesty. It's a mainstream historical fact that this covering signals your new legal and economic status as a married woman who possesses authority and property rights. You are a figure of respect, and that kerchief is a public declaration of your power. The marriage itself is usually arranged often to seal an alliance between two powerful families or to consolidate land. But unlike in many later European societies, you are not simply property being exchanged. The agreement negotiated in front of witnesses is a complex marriage contract detailing your dowry munder and your rights to it. This is a crucial distinction. You retain significant control over your wealth. If the marriage fails, and divorces are surprisingly common and initiated by either party, you take your property with you. Your worth is not absorbed into your husband's estate. This financial independence is part of why you are a warrior and a manager. You are a valuable, self-contained unit of economic power. Imagine the gifting ceremony. You don't receive cheap plastic appliances. You receive land silver, high-quality weaponry, perhaps even a thrall or two. These gifts are yours to manage and use. Your husband may have married you for your family's land, but the land is still controlled by you, the key holder of the estate, when he is away raiding. And he will be away raiding. Your marital status is less about permanent companionship and more about a strategic, functional partnership designed to increase the power and security of both your families. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit concerning the divorce process. A woman could divorce her husband simply by declaring it in front of witnesses and citing specific grounds. One particularly interesting ground for divorce was if the husband failed to adequately provide for his wife, or perhaps more humorously, but equally seriously, if he wore garments considered too effeminate, like an overly low-cut linen shirt. The point is, you had legal avenues for escape, and they were respected under the law of the Ing. You are not trapped. Now, as a warrior who has chosen the Shieldmaiden path, your marriage might look a little different. Your husband, who is likely a chieftain or a high-ranking member of the herd, respects your skills. He knows you can manage the farm, but he also knows you might choose to accompany him on a raid. This flexibility is part of your allure. You bring not only land and silver, but also a skilled blade to the battlefield. Your marriage is a testament to the belief that competence trumps gender. Historians still argue whether the high status and relative legal freedom of Viking women were unique to Scandinavia, or a reflection of the economic necessity in a society where men were often absent. Some scholars suggest the Christianization of the North later stripped women of these freedoms, replacing the old laws with patrilineal systems. But right now, you stand firm in your legal rights. You wear your kerchief with a sense of pride, not subjugation. It signifies your shift from a trainee warrior to the matriarch of a powerful household, a manager of men, money, and muscle. And muscle you need because the next logical step in this marriage, whether you stay home or not, is the sea. Your new life is bound up with the longships, and soon you will find yourself on the unpredictable, vast expense of the cold northern ocean. You check the stitching on your sailcloth baggage. You are the Heiðsfreyja, the keyholder, and the Shieldmaiden. You are ready to sail. Your life now is dominated by the longship, the ultimate symbol of Viking power and mobility. Whether it's the sleek, shallow-drafted Drakkar built for speed and warfare, or the broader, deeper-hulled Nar designed for cargo and colonization, the sea is your second home, and it is a brutal, cramped, and magnificent place. You are no longer just a warrior of the herd. You are a seafarer, an expert in the rhythm of the waves and the complex geometry of the sail. Stepping onto the deck of the longship, you immediately feel the difference between the solid earth and this buoyant, floating world. There is no luxury here. This isn't a modern cruise. It's a floating coffin, perpetually cold and wet. You find your spot wedged in among the rowing benches, your shield hung strategically over the gunwale to provide a bit of windbreak and protection from spray. Your sleep, when it comes, is a jerky, intermittent process of trying to find comfort on a hard wooden surface, often curled up under your coarse wool cloak, which never seems to fully dry. The cold is a constant, subtle enemy, leaching warmth and energy from your bones. A mainstream historical fact about these ships is that they were primarily propelled by sails when possible, using the oars only for maneuvering in harbor's shallow waters or when the wind failed. The sails, often made of durable, coarse wool that was sometimes treated with fat or oil for water resistance, are immense, and you quickly learn how to handle the ropes and understand the complex rigging. If you're not rowing, you're bailing, you're watching the sky for changes in the weather, or you're mending the sail. There is always work. It's like being on a really aggressive, really uncomfortable camping trip that lasts for months. The cramped quarters force an intense, almost claustrophobic intimacy with your crewmates. You eat, sleep, and relieve yourself within sight and sound of everyone else. Your life shrinks down to the necessities: food, water, sleep, and the smooth, cold wood of the planking beneath you. You become acutely aware of the subtle shift in the ship's balance, the creak of the hull, the distinct smell of salt-crusted wood mixed with unwashed bodies, stale food, and the tar used to caulk the seams. There's a powerful, almost spiritual relationship with the water. The sea, known as Gyr in the myths, is not just a highway. It is a fickle, terrifying deity who must be respected. When the sea rises up in a storm, your fear is palpable. You are tossed around like a cork, the waves crashing over the gunwales, forcing everyone to bail frantically. You watch your husband or the chieftain, gripping the tiller with grim concentration, his face illuminated by the flashes of lightning. In these moments, you realize how small and fragile you are. This fear is a constant, subtle hum, the knowledge that a rogue, wave a sudden squall or a hidden rock, can end your journey and your life instantly. A quirky or fringe tidbit is the method of navigation used by your sailors. Lacking modern compasses, they relied on a mix of landmark observation, celestial navigation, and perhaps even the sunstone. Mysterious crystal historians still argue if it was calcite or cordierite that could allegedly polarize light and help locate the sun, even on an overcast day. You spend hours learning to read the clouds and the flight patterns of seabirds, which signal the proximity of land. Historians still argue whether Viking ships were inherently unstable in heavy seas, or if the later sagas simply exaggerate the dangers for dramatic effect. What is undisputed is that a successful voyage required supreme skill and a powerful, cohesive crew. Your skills in the herd, the ability to work seamlessly in a tight unit transfer, perfectly to the ship. You are an essential part of the living organism that is the longship. You row, you fight, and you endure. The monotonous repetition of the waves, the rhythmic pull of the oar, and the endless expanse of the gray water lull you into a strange, detached state. It is in this rocking cradle of cold exhaustion that you find your calm before the inevitable, violent action on the distant shores. In the monotony of the longship, or the long dark of a Scandinavian winter, the myths and the ancient tales are not merely stories. They are the bedrock of your reality. You live and breathe the sagas, They are your history, your prophecy, and your moral code. You are steeped in the lore of the Sur and the Vanir, the gods who shape your world, and the concept of fate or word which governs your actions. You listen to the skald, the poet, who is more than just an entertainer. He is the living archive of your people. He recites the complex alliterative verses of the poetic Edda and the prose Edda around the central hearth, fire-weaving tales of gods like Odin, the one-eyed All-Father, and Thor, the protector of Midgard, and wielder of the mighty hammer Mjolnir. You learn the importance of bravery and honor through the sagas of heroes who met their ends with a sword in hand, knowing that a glorious death that allows you passage to Valhalla Odin's great Hallis, the only way to truly defeat Weird. The concept of wired is a mainstream historical fact that informs your entire worldview. It is not simple predestination, but the interconnected matrix of all past actions and consequences which shapes the present and the future. You are constantly weaving your own weird through your choices. Your decision to take up the shield and join the herd was a conscious decision to weave a thread of glory and potential violence into your own fate. You understand that your ultimate glory will be determined not by how long you live, but by the reputation or fame that you leave behind. This drive for a lasting reputation, a sort of eternal life through memory, is what pushes you through the relentless cold and the terrifying combat. There's a quirky or fringe tidbit concerning the skaldic poetry itself. It was incredibly complex, using elaborate metaphors called kennings. For example, a battle is not just a battle. It might be the sweat of the sword or the storm of spears. Gold isn't gold, it's the fire of the sea or Freya's tears. Learning to understand these intricate verbal puzzles is a sign of a sharp mind and cultural sophistication. When the skald praises your chieftain, or maybe even you, the Shieldmaiden, for a recent raid, he won't just say, "She fought well." He might say, "The Shieldmaiden, breaker of mail, stained the serpent's lair with the wolf's tooth," which is a very poetic way of saying you successfully led a bloody sword fight. And let's be honest, it sounds way cooler on a resume. This mythological framework also gives shape to your understanding of life and death. The dead are not simply gone. They are on a journey. Those who die a coward's death or of illness go to Hell's Ream, cold, gray, and depressing place. Those who die valiantly in battle are chosen by the Valkyries' female spirit warriors and brought to Valhalla, where they spend eternity feasting and practicing for Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. As a Shieldmaiden, this distinction is everything. Your goal is a noble death in battle, ensuring your spiritual destination. The women of your time, whether warrior or Hs Freyja, believe in this spiritual continuity just as fiercely as the men. Historians still argue whether the sagas we read today, which were mostly written down in Iceland centuries after the Viking Age, accurately reflect the everyday beliefs of the 9th and 10th century Scandinavians, or if they were colored by Christian influence. Some scholars suggest the Shieldmaiden was greatly embellished in these later accounts, but for you, the sagas are living truth. They are the narratives that justify the hard choices you make, the journeys you endure, and the violence you inflict. They provide comfort in the knowledge that your struggles are part of a greater cosmic struggle between the forces of order and chaos. And as the skald wraps up his recitation, the firelight flickering over the faces of the listening warriors, you feel a deep, reassuring connection to the thousands of ancestors whose threads are woven into your own wired. The glory of the raid and the majesty of the longship are only one half of your life. When the men are away, and they are always away, you return to the demanding reality of domestic life. This is where your status as the Freya, the mistress of the house and the holder of the keys, truly shines. You are the chief executive officer of a complex, often sprawling estate, and your work is far from easy. You hold the key to the main storage chest, a simple, heavy piece of ironwork that is the physical symbol of your authority. This key gives you control over the family's wealth, its stores of food, its trading goods, and the precious silver used for exchange. A mainstream historical fact is that Viking Age society relied heavily on silver bullion, often cut or chopped up for smaller transactions known as hack silver, as a form of currency. You are responsible for weighing this hack silver, determining its purity, and deciding what resources to trade for. You are a skilled merchant managing the family's imports of salt iron, or perhaps fine whetstones, and overseeing the export of things like furs, walrus ivory, or cured fish. Your days are a whirlwind of logistical demands. You are not simply cooking and cleaning. You are managing a complex supply chain designed to sustain your family and its hired through the harsh Scandinavian winter. You oversee the preservation of food, salting meat, drying fish, and brewing ale. You manage the wool production, from shearing the sheep to spinning the yarn and weaving the cloth, ensuring everyone has the layers of thick wool necessary to survive the cold. This is the practical, boring history nobody tells you about the warrior. Life is impossible without a hyper-competent logistics team back home, and you are the team leader. You are also the manager of labor, which includes the thralls, slaves captured on previous raids. We'll discuss the specifics of the thrall system soon, but for now, know that you direct their labor in the fields, at the weaving loom, and in the barn with a firm hand. Their productivity is a direct measure of your management skill and contributes directly to your family's wealth. You maintain order, dispense justice, and settle minor disputes among the workers. Here's a quirky or fringe tidbit. Your knowledge of practical medicine is extensive. You mix poultices from herbs, treat burns, and set broken bones, but you also use less savory remedies. For example, some historians suggest that the use of moldy bread on wounds, a natural source of penicillin, was known to early European healers, though likely understood through trial and error, not science. You rely on generations of oral knowledge to keep your people and your animals healthy. And let's be honest, cleaning out the Longhouse stable is a task that makes managing a spreadsheet feel like a spa day. Historians still argue whether the Freya had de jure legal power over the estate or merely de facto practical power because of her husband's absence. What's undeniable is that your daily authority is immense. You host visiting traders, negotiate with rival clan leaders, and even have the authority to call up local fighting forces if the estate is threatened. You are, in essence, the temporary chieftain. You are the linchpin holding the economic and defensive structure together. You might feel the lack of a good night's sleep tonight, but try to imagine the quiet relief when your husband finally returns from the sea. He may be the warrior and the raider, but he knows who kept the fire burning, the accounts balanced, and the farm safe. He knows that his continued success depends on your relentless, capable management of the home front. You put the massive iron key on its hook for the night, the weight of the day settling on you, and for a moment you let yourself appreciate the quiet power of simply keeping everything running. When the call to raid comes, your skills as a Freya are set aside and the warrior returns. Your armor isn't some fanciful, impractical garment. It is a heavy, multi-layered system designed for survival in the most miserable conditions. Dressing for battle is a sober, methodical process that emphasizes protection and mobility over aesthetics. You start with the base layer's thick tunics of wool and linen. These layers are crucial, especially in the cold northern climates and on the wet deck of a ship. They provide insulation, but more importantly, they wick away sweat, preventing a chill that can quickly turn fatal. You pull on thick cross-gartered trousers and sturdy leather boots that are durable enough for long marches across rough, uneven ground. Over this, you add the protection. Your most valuable piece of personal armor, a clear mainstream historical fact, is the byrnie or chainmail shirt. This is a coat of interlocking iron rings painstakingly made by the smith, and it's brutally heavy, often weighing 20 pounds or more when dry and far more when soaked with sea spray or blood. Putting it on feels like draping yourself in cold, flexible iron. It's an enormous financial investment, a sign of your high status, and a testament to your family's wealth. You maintain this yourself, ensuring the rings are free of rust and damage. The last thing you want is a broken link failing you at a critical moment. To protect your head, you have a simple conical iron helmet, often with a single bar that extends down to protect the nose, sometimes called a spectacle helm, depending on the style. You never go into battle without it. It's hot, it's constricting, and it muffles sounds, but a direct blow to the head is the quickest way to Valhalla, and you're not ready to go yet. Underneath the helm, you wear a thick, padded cap, often made of linen, or leather to absorb the shock of a blow that lands on the metal. It's the closest you get to a modern bicycle helmet, just a lot heavier. You secure your shield strap across your back, and you feel the familiar presence of the massive round shield constructed of thin planks of wood-like pine or fur covered in leather and featuring a central iron boss. The wood is designed to be expendable. The shield is meant to take the punishment so your body doesn't have to. You learn to maintain a fresh supply of these, knowing a shield's lifespan can be measured in minutes during a serious engagement. A quirky or fringe tidbit about Viking armor is that some archaeological finds suggest the use of hardened leather armor boiled in wax or oil to create a material that offered significant protection without the immense cost or weight of chainmail. Perhaps you or the less wealthy members of the herd wear a simple reinforced leather cuirass instead of chainmail. It's lighter, faster, but you definitely prefer the satisfying clink of iron rings between you and an enemy axe. The total effect is one of bulk and weight. You are moving a significant load, and every training drill from Section 2 now makes agonizing sense. You trudge under this weight, realizing the immense energy expenditure required simply to wear your gear, let alone fight in it. This is why being strong is not a boast, it's a necessity. Historians still argue whether chainmail was commonly worn by the average raider or reserved mostly for chieftains and their elite herd. The archaeological evidence shows it was present, but perhaps not ubiquitous. You, as a valued member of the chieftain's inner circle, are afforded the best protection available. As you finish tightening the last leather strap, you look at your reflection in the polished surface of your shield boss. Gone is the H.S. Freya of the Longhouse. In her place is the Shieldmaiden, ready to move from the tedious work of management to the terrifying chaos of war. Fully armored and ready, you turn your attention to the tools of your trade, your weapons. As a Shieldmaiden, you don't wield whatever is lying around. You use equipment that is proven reliable and suits your fighting style. Every piece is an extension of your will, and you treat them with the respect due to items that will decide whether you live or die. The undisputed champion of the battlefield, the mainstream historical fact you rely on is the spear. You carry several. There is the long, heavier throwing spear designed for piercing armor and keeping an enemy at a distance, and a lighter, shorter version for close-quarters fighting. The spear is economical, fast, and devastatingly effective. You prefer it because it requires less raw strength than a heavy axe, allowing you to use leverage and speed to your advantage. You practice the thrust until it is reflexive understanding that in the chaos of battle, a sudden, precise strike with a point is often more valuable than a wide, powerful swing with a blade. Your sword is your secondary but most prestigious weapon. Unlike the modern image of the Viking with a massive two-handed axe, you understand that the battle axe is actually clumsy and slow in a shield wall or on the rolling deck of a ship. It's difficult to recover from a missed swing, and that moment of imbalance can cost you your life. The sword, with its balanced weight and double edge, is versatile. You learn to fight with the sword and shield, keeping the shield forward to absorb blows while using the sword to target the exposed limbs or neck of an opponent. It's a dance of controlled aggression, a rapid sequence of block, punch, and cut. Here's a quirky or fringe tidbit about your weaponry. You may also carry a small bundle of short, barbed javelins tucked into your belt or shield strap. These are specifically designed to be thrown just before engaging in close combat. The goal isn't necessarily to kill, but to injure, distract, or force an opponent to drop their shield as they deal with a painful embedded barb. It's a psychological weapon as much as a physical one, disrupting the enemy formation just before you clash. Think of it as the Viking Age equivalent of throwing a flashbang. Your most important weapon, however, isn't a blade or a point. It's your shield. As you learned in the herd, remember that intense shield wall practice from Section 2, the shield is everything. It is a striking surface, a personal barricade, and a psychological defense. You rely on its wooden structure to absorb blows that would shatter bone, knowing that you can replace the shield, but not your skull. You use the central iron boss not just for protection, but as a powerful iron-shod fist to smash into an opponent's face or chest. A well-placed shield punch can break ribs or simply knock a man off balance, creating the split-second opening you need for your spear or sword. Historians still argue whether the seax, the large single-edged knife you wear at your hip for all daily tasks, was used frequently in battle, or if it was primarily a utility knife and a backup weapon for when your primary tools were lost or broken. For you, the seax is the ultimate fallback, the close-in weapon you resort to when grappling used for a desperate slash or a gut thrust. You rely on your training, your muscle memory, and your understanding that in combat, simplicity and practicality always trump flash and theatrical moves. You are not fighting for glory in a story. You are fighting for your life, and that requires the most efficient means possible. As the HS Freya back home, you manage labor. On the raid, you manage the direct results of that labor, the thralls. The system of thralldom or slavery is a grim, inescapable fact of Viking Age society, and your family's economic status is built in part upon the backs of these people. A thrall, or RLL, plural RLAR, is simply someone who has lost their freedom, usually captured during a raid in the British Isles, Francia, or Eastern Europe, or occasionally someone who has fallen into debt slavery. This is a mainstream historical fact. The slave trade was a massive and highly profitable component of the Viking economy. For you, the Shieldmaiden thralls are both valuable assets to be protected and sources of cheap, expandable labor to be managed. In the Longhouse, you interact with them daily. They grind the grain hull, the water, clean the animals, and perform the most brutal, mind-numbing agricultural labor. You direct them issuing orders, dispensing meager rations, and ensuring their productivity. Their lives are entirely dependent on your decisions. You learn quickly that brutality is often counterproductive, leading to passive resistance and broken tools, while a careful balance of harshness and grudging fairness keeps them working. The thrall system creates a distinct social hierarchy, separating the free Carl from the unfree RLL. You, a freeborn woman, are entitled to all the rights and protections of the the assembly. They are not. Their only value is their labor. However, there is a glimmer of hope for some. A quirkier fringe tidbit is that thralls could sometimes buy their freedom, a process called manumission, or they could be freed by their owners as a mark of piety or a reward for exceptional service. Once freed, they became a leisinger, a slightly lower class of freedmen, but free nonetheless, and their children were fully free. You might even oversee this process if a thrall has served your household exceptionally well. It's a complicated medieval form of performance review. Your interaction with thralls on a raid is different. They might be pressed into service as deckhands forced to row or ordered to carry the heavy plunder. They are always kept under close watch, as the last thing you need is a revolt in the middle of hostile territory. You know that if the tide of battle turns, a thrall's loyalty is tenuous at best. Historians still argue whether the treatment of thralls varied significantly across different Scandinavian regions, or if their legal status was uniformly bleak. While the sagas describe extremely harsh conditions, including human sacrifice in some contexts, there's also evidence of familial integration, where children of thralls and free people were sometimes allowed to exist. But regardless of the scholarly debate, you operate within the reality that your economic stability is tied to the constant demand for fresh slaves and your ability to manage the ones you own. As you prepare to board the longship, you see a line of recent captures, tied together with rope, their faces pale with terror and exhaustion. They are the human cost of the raid, the plunder that comes alive. You look past them, not with callous disregard, but with the focused, dispassionate eye of a merchant assessing livestock. They are merely a resource, a means to an end, and their suffering is simply part of the price of your family's prosperity and your path to glory. The moment you've trained for, the one romanticized in the sagas and feared in your quietest moments, is finally upon you. The longship beaches with a grinding sound. The oarsmen ship their oars, and the warriors, you included, spill out onto the hostile shore. This is the first raid, and it is nothing like the disciplined, controlled sparring in the herd. It is a chaotic sensory explosion. The first thing that hits you is the noise, the yells of your crewmates, the foreign shouts of the villagers, the terrifying sound of wooden buildings being hacked apart, and the high-pitched, desperate cries of those defending their homes. It's a deafening roar that scrambles your trained reflexes. Then comes the smell, a horrifying cocktail of burning thatch, animal panic, wood smoke, and the sharp metallic tang of fresh blood that cuts through everything else. You move forward, your shield held high, planted firmly in the shield wall that forms instantly under the chieftain's bellowed orders. This is the mainstream historical fact. You cling to discipline, and formation are your only friends. You use your spear to prod and thrust, focusing on the narrow gaps between the enemy's crude defenses. Your training takes over, transforming your fear into focused, violent action. You don't aim for the face. You aim for the soft spots, the thigh, the gut, the armpit. The shock of the violence is deeply unsettling. You realize combat is incredibly messy. It's not a clean cut. It's a desperate struggle, often involving grappling, stumbling over uneven ground, and the sickening sound of metal meeting bone. You parry a wild swing from a frantic defender, an angry farmer, not a trained soldier, and use your shield boss. Remember that iron-shod fist from Section 8 to slam into his face, buying you a fraction of a second to deliver a precise counter. You find your rage the cold, practical fury that allows you to see the enemy, not as a person, but as a problem to be eliminated, a quirky or fringe tidbit that often gets lost in the glory stories is the simple fact of exhaustion. The adrenaline surge is immense, but the weight of your burny chainmail and the constant effort of keeping your shield up drain your energy rapidly. You fight in short, brutal bursts, leaning on your neighbor in the shield wall to rest your muscles for a moment before plunging back into the fray. You realize that endurance is just as important as striking power. It's like an ancient, muddy, high-stakes hit workout, and the stakes are your life. You witness the ruthlessness of the raid, the quick, brutal acquisition of goods, the rounding up of people to be taken as thralls, and the rapid, systematic destruction designed to terrorize and prevent immediate pursuit. You are not here for justice or ideology. You are here for wealth and glory. The sheer, unadulterated selfishness of the act settles in your gut. Historians still argue whether the speed and intensity of Viking raids were due to superior tactical training or simply the overwhelming psychological effect of their sudden, brutal arrival. For you, it feels like both. The sheer terror in the eyes of the people you are attacking is a weapon in itself. As the fighting subsides and the longships are loaded with plunder, silver goods, and human cargo, you feel a strange mix of nauseous exhaustion and profound elation. You have survived. You have fought alongside your herd, and you have contributed directly to the family wealth. You wipe the blood and grime from your sword, the metal now warm from the action, and you understand that you are forever changed. The memory of the raid will be a dark thread in your wired, but it is also a powerful one. After the raw physical violence of the raid, you seek comfort and a sense of order in the non-physical realm. You turn your gaze toward the subtle, often terrifying power of Norse magic and the practitioners who channel it. You might not be a sorceress yourself, but you respect and occasionally consult the vulva, the seeress. The vulva is an elderly woman, often unmarried or childless, who travels the lands holding a position of immense, if often feared, authority. A mainstream historical fact is that the vulva practiced, a complex form of Old Norse sorcery that involved weaving trance prophecy and sometimes manipulation of fate. She is the opposite of the straightforward bloody sword fight. Her power is subtle, psychological, and deeply unsettling. When you seek out the vulva, perhaps to ask about the success of an upcoming raid or the health of your stored grain, you find her usually seated on a high-decorated platform, Yaller. She uses ritual chanting Galder to enter a trance, and as her voice changes, sometimes adopting a spectral, otherworldly quality, she begins to see threads of wired remember, that concept of fate from Section 5. You listen in tense silence as she speaks in riddles and metaphors, offering glimpses into the future or advising on how to avert disaster. Her counsel is costly, usually paid in silver or valuable trade goods, but her words are taken with grim seriousness. A quirky or fringe tidbit about Seir is that while the vulva was highly respected, the actual practice of magic was often considered unmanly or ergy for men. This perceived gender dynamic meant that women were the primary practitioners of this powerful form of prophecy and spiritual manipulation. It solidified the vulva's unique liminal role in society. She was essential, powerful, but distinctly separate from the masculine warrior culture she advised. It's a little bit like the ultimate exclusive women's club, but the membership fee is dealing with the occasional visit from Odin himself. You might ask her for a specific amulet or talisman to protect you on the next voyage. It might be a simple piece of wood carved with runes, not letters, but potent symbols with magical meaning to protect your ship from storms, or a small charm to turn an enemy's blade. This practical use of magic as a form of spiritual engineering is common. You need all the help you can get, whether from a sharp spear or a protective binding spell. Historians still argue whether the accounts of Sayre and the Vulvus power were actual accepted religious practices or literary devices used in the sagas to denote exotic or forbidden power. What is clear, however, is that for you and your people, the veil between worlds is thin. You live in a world where giants and monsters are real, where the gods intervene directly, and where a witch's curse can ruin a harvest or sink a ship. You acknowledge the mystical, and you pay your silver for the chance to peek through the curtain of your own destiny. You leave the Vulvus tent with the weight of her cryptic advice heavy on your mind, knowing that even the strongest shield can't protect you from ill-omened weird. The journey is long, but eventually you arrive not just to raid, but to settle. This often means sailing to places like the Danelaw, that large area of England where Viking law and customs were established, or the new settlements in Normandy, or the nascent colonies in Iceland and Greenland. This transition from raider to settler, from warrior to governor, presents a completely new set of challenges, particularly for you as a Shieldmaiden and H.S. Freya. As a settler, you are no longer making quick smash-and-grab raids. Remember the shocking chaos of the first raid in Section 10. You are establishing a permanent presence. This requires patience, a keen understanding of governance, and a willingness to deal with cultural friction. Your task, as the manager of a newly acquired estate, is to maintain Norse identity and law while interacting with and governing the native populations, be they Anglo-Saxons, Franks, or Celts. A mainstream historical fact is that the Norse settlements in the Danelaw fundamentally changed the English language, introducing thousands of Norse loanwords, including common words like sky, give, take, and even the plural pronoun they. You are living at the intersection of two cultures, and the language mixing that you hear in the marketplace is a daily reminder of this ongoing collision. You might find yourself having to manage trade disputes between a Norse farmer operating under the laws of the Eining and an Anglo-Saxon peasant who refers to the local shire reeve. Your legal knowledge, remember, the marriage contracts from Section 3 is now applied to civil disputes. The logistics of governing conquered land are immense. You have to ensure that Norse customs are maintained, like the relative legal freedom and property rights of women, while dealing with local hostility and resistance. You're constantly managing trade, securing food supplies, and ensuring that your settlers are reproducing and thriving. Your home is now a fortified longhouse, but the walls are not just physical, they are cultural. Here's a quirky or fringe tidbit. In the Danelaw, the Norse system of 12-man juries for legal proceedings contrasted sharply with the older Anglo-Saxon methods of trial by ordeal, like carrying a hot iron. This more evidence-based legal system was one of the lasting Norse contributions, and as a settler, you may be involved in these legal assemblies acting as a witness, or even helping the local Norse chieftain adjudicate disputes. It's like running a full-time, high-stakes medieval law firm, and you're the managing partner. Historians still argue whether the Norse settlements were primarily peaceful, slow assimilation, or sustained military occupation. The reality as you live it is a mixture of both. There are periods of uneasy truce intermarriage and sharing of technology punctuated by sudden, violent revolts or conflicts over land boundaries. You, the Shieldmaiden, still keep your sword sharp because a successful negotiation today does not guarantee a peaceful night tomorrow. You look out over the fields of your new home, the Norse banners snapping in the foreign wind. The hard-won glory of the raid has settled into the hard, boring work of colonization. But there is a different kind of satisfaction here. The knowledge that your family and your culture are putting down deep roots, expanding your all-fair beyond the fjords of your ancestors. Every warrior, no matter how skilled or well-armored, remember your heavy Bernie from Section 7 must confront the very real possibility of dying on the battlefield. For you, the Shieldmaiden, this potential end is not a source of fear, but a key component of your quest for glory and a ticket to Valhalla, that heavenly feasting hall from Section 5. The concept that a woman could die a warrior's death is not just saga legend. It is a theory powerfully supported by a famous archaeological debate. The site is Birka, a major Viking Age trading center in Sweden, and the discovery is the grave known as BJ 581. This is the mainstream historical fact that has recently shaken the foundations of Viking studies. The tomb was richly furnished with a full panoply of a high-status warrior, a sword, an axe, a spear, a shield, 2 horses, 1 mare, 1 stallion, and gaming pieces for a strategy board game, like Hanafatov Remember, that training tool from Section 2. For over a century, the skeleton buried there was automatically assumed to be male, a powerful chieftain or general. Then came the quirky or fringe tidbit DNA analysis in 2017 revealed that the individual in the grave was definitively female. This discovery did not just confirm that women held high military positions. It showed that this particular woman was interred with the highest possible military honors, suggesting she was a tactical commander. For you, the Shieldmaiden, this grave is a silent, stone-cold validation of your life's ambition, the proof that your sacrifices are honored in death. This discovery ignited a fierce scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Birka grave represents a common accepted role for female military leaders or a highly exceptional rare case, perhaps a woman of unique lineage who was granted warrior status for specific political or familial reasons. Skeptics point out that the woman may have been a planner, a general, or even a vulva who consulted on strategy, remember the seeress from Section 11, and not necessarily a frontline combatant. However, those who accept the Shieldmaiden's reality argue that the inclusion of the 2 horses, the full weapons array, and the Hnefatafel pieces indicates a person intimately involved in the practical and strategic elements of warfare. For you, standing on the deck of your ship, ready for the next raid, the debate doesn't change the immediate danger, but it changes the meaning of your potential death. If you fall, you hope to fall well, earning the honor of the Valkyries, and the right to be buried with your weapons, your horse, and your wealth, just like the commander at Birka. That grave is more than just a burial site. It is a historical contract, a promise of recognition for the ultimate sacrifice. You adjust the fit of your sword belt. The possibility of death is woven into the very fabric of your existence, but so is the possibility of eternal, unforgotten glory. The raiding season, that frenetic, bloody, and profitable period, does not last forever. As the days visibly shorten and the air takes on a truly sharp, permanent chill, you begin the arduous journey home. This is the end of the raiding season, and it signals a necessary dramatic shift back to the political and logistical intensity of winter survival. The voyage home, as a mainstream historical fact, is often just as perilous as the outward journey. The North Sea and the cold Atlantic are infamous for brutal autumn storms. You spend the days on the longship, struggling against the heavy swells, bailing water, and praying to the gods for safe passage. Your body is covered in scars old and new, and every muscle aches with the fatigue that months of continuous effort has etched into your very bones. But there is an undeniable quiet satisfaction in your bearing. Your status is elevated. You are no longer just a Æsfreya. You are a successful warrior who has returned with wealth, and more importantly, with your life. Arriving back at your settlement is a moment of profound relief. The smell of wood smoke and the sight of your longhouse, despite its rough-hewn simplicity, feel like the greatest luxury imaginable. You immediately dive back into the tedious but vital work you performed as the keyholder. Remember your logistical mastery from Section 6. First, the plunder must be sorted, weighed, and stored. The silver and gold are melted or cut down into manageable pieces of hack silver. The textiles and slaves are counted, and the resources are allocated. This is a time of intense auditing and negotiation, ensuring that every member of the herd, including yourself, receives the appropriate share based on their contribution and rank. Here's a quirky or fringe tidbit about this transition. As the longships are pulled ashore and prepared for winter storage, they are often covered and sealed with turf or sods of earth, turning the massive, elegant vessels into insulated, temporary homes or workshops for the winter. This practice of tucking the boat into bed for the cold months is a testament to the supreme value placed on the longship, the family's economic engine. It's like putting a very large, expensive sports car up on blocks, but the garage is your front yard and the cover is made of grass. The arrival of winter means the start of the political season. Travel becomes difficult, forcing chieftains and powerful families to gather indoors. These winter gatherings are filled with feasting storytelling. The skalds will now celebrate the deeds of your recent Raider Member Section 5 and intense negotiations. Alliances are solidified or shattered. Marriage contracts are finalized. A major piece of the political game, Remember Section 3, and plans for the next season's raids and expansions are laid. You, with your recently earned wealth and combat reputation, are now a more formidable player in these political games. You speak with greater authority, and your opinions on strategy and resource management are given serious weight. Historians still argue whether the Viking Age's intense focus on feasting and winter social life was primarily driven by necessity. Use up perishable food and maintain warmth, or if it was a deep-seated cultural mechanism for maintaining social cohesion and establishing power hierarchies through ostentatious generosity. For you, it's both. You feast to celebrate survival and success, but you also watch every move, every glance, knowing that the political landscape can shift as quickly and violently as the shield wall you stood in months ago. The Shieldmaiden puts down the sword only to pick up the more dangerous weapons of diplomacy and status. You sit by the hearth fire during the long winter, the flames casting shadows on the worn leather of your scabbard, and you reflect on the totality of your life, the long voyages, the managed estates, the violence, and the quiet authority. Your greatest realization is that your efforts, whether leading a charge or simply ensuring the grain store didn't rot, will not just benefit your children. They will become part of the very fabric of Norse identity, securing your legacy through the whispers of legend. The concept of a lasting reputation or fame is the ultimate driver in your culture. It is a mainstream historical fact that the ancient Norse saw death not as an end, but as a transition, where the only true defeat was to be forgotten. You lived your life not for transient wealth, but to weave a word, remember, the threads of fate from Section 5 so bright and compelling that the skalds, those poetic historians from Section 5, would be compelled to sing of it for generations. Your legacy isn't simple. It's multifaceted, a blend of your two primary roles. First, as a warrior, the Shieldmaiden. Your acts of courage, the shield wall holding firm, from Section 2, the successful thrust of a spear, from Section 8. The sight of you standing, armored and bloody, on a foreign shore from Section 10 will be woven into the heroic tales alongside the men. You are a powerful counter-narrative to the idea that only men can achieve battlefield glory, a living, breathing testament to the fierce potential of the women of the North. Second, your legacy as the H.S. Freya from Section 6 is just as vital. The strength of your estate management, how you handled the Hacksilver from Section 6, how you kept the thralls productive from Section 9, and how you secured strategic marriages from Section 3 will be praised as an essential component of the family's success. Your clever diplomacy during the political winter season from Section 14 will be recounted with admiration. Your fame is built on both the sword and the key. Here's a quirky or fringe tidbit. The sagas are filled not only with tales of warriors, but also women who used their wit and mastery of language to enact revenge or secure favorable legal outcomes. A woman who successfully navigated a difficult divorce, remember those property rights from Section 3, or who shamed a powerful rival, through a well-crafted, insulting verse, was sometimes held in higher regard than a man who simply won a clumsy brawl. Your cleverness, your sharp tongue, and your political acumen are all weapons that contribute to your enduring fame. Historians still argue whether the enduring popularity of the Shieldmaiden in the sagas was a form of wish fulfillment or a genuine reflection of a societal belief that women deserved a place in the quest for glory. But for you, the answer is already written in the archaeological record, in the possibility of graves like the one at Birka from Section 13. Your hope is that if your remains are ever found, future generations will look at your weapons and your wealth and know instantly and without question that you were a person of power, skill, and authority. You look into the fire, the quiet, repetitive crackle lulling you. The legends of your own life are beginning to form, shifting from immediate reality to the comforting haze of memory. You are a thread in the great tapestry of Norse history, a woman who bent word to her will, a figure who will be remembered not because you were a shield maiden, but because you were an exceptional leader, a fearsome warrior, and an unforgettable ancestor. The fire is now fading, dropping into a bed of soft red embers. You can feel the great weight of history, of all those ships, all those battles, all those long, cold nights finally settling. The echoes of the clash of steel, the frantic beat of the storm waves, and the whispers of the vulva are growing softer, distant now, like a half-remembered dream. You are safe, now return from your long journey through the brutal, beautiful world of the Vikings. You fought well, managed wisely, and you've earned your rest. There is nothing left to defend, nothing left to manage, just the slow, steady rhythm of your own breath. Let the dark come. Let the silence wrap around you. You did enough today. Your story is sealed, your name secured in the records of fame. Rest now, warrior. Drift into the deep, welcoming quiet. Sweet, deep sleep is all that awaits. Sweet dreams.